Hello, everyone. We are live here with Julian, the founder of Bezi, and we're really excited to speak to you about how you can become a spatial designer in 2024, designing in different dimensions. We prompted some. I have some questions queued up from what everyone submitted, but as we wait for everyone to trickle in, we'd love to know where y'all are in and what is your profession in the chat. Let's start with you, Julian. Where are you at, and what is your
I
journey?
am I am in San Francisco, so I would love to see if anyone's in San Francisco today. Very sunny. Uh, I currently am working on Bezi. I'm the co-founder and CEO, which is a a collaborative spatial design platform. So what that is we're reimagining what a design tool really can be for this new era of spatial computing. So, we'll go through a lot of that during the conversation today. But Bezi essentially is a way for you to design 3D apps and games much faster than ever before. So we'll go through what that means.
Yes, very excited. We suddenly have 134 people on LinkedIn. So, hi everyone. Thank you all for being so prompt.
Wow.
I'm in San Francisco as well. I love SF. I run a founder designer house called the Buddy House, which is inspired by design buddies here in SF. And my profession changed a lot throughout the years. My background is I wanted to be an anime artist when I was growing up, and then I was in pre-med, bioengineering, and then game dev and VR. So making a lot of spatial design experiences as well. Was making VR games for education and training surgeons to do surgery. And then I was a UX designer at Electronic Arts, the games industry, for a couple of years before I decided to leave the corporate world 2 weeks ago to do community building, events, content creation full time. I see a lot of people in the chat. Oh my God, 151. Nice on LinkedIn. So we see Marcio from Colombia. Mohit is a spatial designer in NYC. Anthony
Welcome.
is a UX designer in New Jersey. Um, Stephanie is in Canada. Thomas is from Toronto. Ten is from Tennessee. LinkedIn user also in SF, Chicago, amazing. So lots of North
Wow.
America here.
That's
Love it.
awesome. Great
Yeah.
to see you all. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names and faces, so it's amazing to hang out today.
Watching from Quest. Oh, that is so cool. I love
Awesome.
this.
I can imagine Fabian just like in his headset, just hanging out. So
It's amazing. We got
yeah.
Brooklyn, we got Scotland. Oh my God, it's like midnight there. Thanks so much for coming. Oh, and great seeing you yesterday at our meetup from East Bay and Benjamin from Phoenix. Yeah, we're excited to get started. Keep chatting in the chat. We have
Yeah.
lots of buddies joining. We do have a lot of topics that we're going to cover for you today, but at any point you have any questions, definitely submit them in the chat on our LinkedIn. We'll highlight y'all, give you a shout out. And without further ado, let's get started. So I'm Grace. I founded Design Buddies. Design Buddies is the world's largest design community now, helping designers improve their skills, land jobs, and make networking fun. Like that, I really just like love it when people can have fun and grow in their careers. I personally started it 4 years ago. Oh, actually, exactly 4 years ago, on April 10th, 2020, when I was a student born at home during Zoom University. And today we have a total combined audience of 150,000 members. And we scaled to lots of in person events here in SF. I'm actually flying to Atlanta in a couple of days to host a meetup there as well. So if you're in Atlanta, let me know. I just decided to move it up last night. and um, and we're so excited to have Bezi as our title sponsor for our conference, Design the Future, happening on Monday, May 20th, in person in San Francisco and online, which is free. Tickets are also limited in SF, so highly recommend signing up soon if you're interested. Today, we'll give you kind of like a teaser on what you'll be learning from our conference. We really want to highlight more spatial design as the rise of Apple Vision's Pro, AR, VR, experiences are on the rise, and AI, woo, AI. And so we'll be talking about all that today. So bring your opinions, bring your buckle up because you're about to be blown away.
Yeah, and I'll also be there. Yeah,
Yes,
it'll be fun too.
I'll be hosting some epic meetups, so you don't want to miss out. And it'll be the biggest event I'll ever be hosting, so stay tuned. And without further ado, welcome, Julian. Excited to have you, co-founder of Bezi. We met actually about more than a year ago. I randomly stumbled upon your 3D designers meetup at the Game Developers Conference in 2023, yes. And we chatted, and we did a design challenge. And it was so much fun. So I just randomly came, and then that's how it all happened.
I still remember when you first appeared on that first floor office area, and then a bunch of us were like, "Wait, I think we recognize her. I think we know her." And then we're and then we were like, "Oh, I do design buddies and stuff like that." So I was like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to see what that's all about." And but I can't believe that's over a year ago.
Yeah, that was so much fun. I was so flattered. So honored.
Yeah. But thanks for having me. Let's do this.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to. And now we're here.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's do some introductions for those who don't know you. What is your background? How did you kind of get to where you are today? What are you currently doing now?
Yeah. Maybe I'll start from when I was in school. I was studying computer science at Berkeley. A lot of my focus has been around computer graphics, which tends to be more 3D graphics oriented. I actually also did some research in AI back then as well. So this whole conversation around generative AI is very relevant. And back then I also wanted to contribute to this rising field of VR, right? So that was when Oculus was really picking up its steam, and I joined Oculus right after college as part of as an engineer in the OS side of things. So for those of you in the audience who've tried out a Quest headset before, I was part of the team that built out a lot of the first party apps, the panel apps that you would interact with when you would put on the Quest headset. And the story goes where during that time, I worked a lot with designers. And this is actually how I met my co-founder, Cecilia, because she was a designer on the team. And they would, often try to design how the product experience would work on the headset because it's such a new medium. But they didn't really have the right tools to do so because they, either could use 2D design tools, which, people are all familiar with, or they would have to use very advanced 3D technical game engines. And the 2D design tools don't offer the level of 3D design that designers would want to express for a headset app. But at the same time, a game engine is just too complex for a designer to really leverage during their work process, during their workflow. So we saw this gap in the middle where there wasn't really a good 3D design tool that people could use to become a spatial designer. And that's how Bezi began. We left Oculus, so me, Cecilia, and Dennis, our third co-founder, and we started Bezi in 2021. And it's been a wild journey since then. But it's been really interesting to also see Apple coming into the space and really popularized the term spatial computing and thereby also spatial design. And I think a lot of people are also realizing that they also need to use a 3D design tool to fully contribute to this space. So that's a bit of history on how we got here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what y'all are building, because when I was personally trying to learn 3D, like when I try to use Maya and Blender, like I feel like if I don't use it for a couple of weeks, I have to relearn the whole thing. And I like smack some
Yes.
random button and then I have to like delete my whole project because I have no idea what shortcut I just used. So really a big fan, and something I would totally recommend to spatial designers or anyone looking to make 3D experiences, especially from a designer. I feel like the use of it reminds me of Figma a lot, so I love about it. Um, yeah. With
Yeah.
our Go ahead.
And I think with some of the existing 3D modeling tools like Blender or Maya, as you mentioned, they're kind of a different breed of software when compared to something like Bezi,
Mhm.
which is more of a design tool than a modeling tool. And I'm actually really excited to kind of go deep inside like what that really means for people who are not as familiar with like the 3D industry today. But I think when people think about like 3D, design, I think oftentimes people associate that with a 3D modeling tool. But the 3D modeling is a very particular type of discipline where your primary goal is to create like an asset, like a sculpt a particular 3D object that you can then use for a different experience. But a 3D design tool like Bezi, I think, is more about kind of designing the flow of the experience itself on top of these models. So yeah, just a bit of context on
Mhm.
some of
Yeah.
those
So
tools.
think about like Adobe Illustrator versus Figma. Like Illustrator, you make like the SVG components. Figma, you package them together to make a whole experience, just like
Right.
Blender and Bezi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. With this topic of spatial design, how would you explain spatial design?
Oof. It's tough. Because I think the meaning behind this term has evolved over the recent years. I think in the past it's been actually more related to the physical world around us, so more around like the architectural or like landscape design, where you're actually thinking about how the space around you is designed. But I think more recently, the tech industry and primarily the entire world is now seeing um, how spatial design also applies to the digital world. So not just like physical atoms that you touch, but digital bits that determine all the content you see every day online or just on your computers or your phones. And as we enter into this era of spatial computing, which is how Apple calls it, I think the spatial design field is emerging as a new discipline for people to really get involved in designing for the space around the human body, which is very different from like designing for a rectangular flat screen that goes on a phone or a laptop screen. So there are a lot of like implications around what that means for a design tool like Bezi to also support that kind of function. So yeah, I think it's an ever evolving field. There are a lot of ways to define it. The way that I see it is just a way to design for the digital space around you, and that could mean different things for different people. But I would also love to see in the comments like how people would define spatial design. That would be an interesting exercise.
Yeah. How would y'all define spatial design in the comments here? I see some comments. Feel free if you guys have any questions at any time, let us know in the chat. I see 310 people on LinkedIn. So howdy people. Don't be shy in the chat. I know it's LinkedIn, but comment away.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the topic of spatial design and design. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's just designing with like depth and immersion and scale in mind, which I think is very different from sort of the rectangular flow-driven design that people have been used to in the product design industry so far.
Adding another dimension. So on that, what are some examples of what spatial designers can create?
So for the context of this definition of spatial design, I think a lot of the artifacts that people create boil down to 3D apps and games. I think apps is also a pretty broad term to describe different interactive experiences that people can have on these devices. But if you think about any app on your phone, for example, that is an experience that you're going through on a 2D screen. But for a spatial app, it's a 3D immersive experience that is a lot higher in fidelity and the number of variables that you kind of have to consider as you think about, from the user's perspective, what is this experience? What is this app that they're going through? And I think, honestly, a lot of these apps and games for the spatial world have undefined or sort of unstandardized design patterns, and things like like scroll or pull to refresh patterns that we take as obvious, take for granted these days on smartphones. A lot of those patterns have not formed yet, like on a spatial device. So I think a lot of that we're about to see more and more experiences and examples come from spatial designers and spatial products in the future.
Very exciting. I see some buddies had their definition of spatial design in the chat. So Andre, oh hi Andre, great meeting at Config, says adding a z-axis to the x and y. Stephanie, for me, it's designing for the 3D space, whether it's AR, VR. Like how far away things relation to the user, how focus happens.
Awesome.
Measurement map. Oh yeah, there's a measurement map on the iPhone. That is very cool. Where do you see spatial design, the role of spatial designers evolving as we cross the next couple of years, like 1, 5, and 10 years?
Yeah, I think the most immediate year is going to be a lot of exploration. So the closest analogy I have in my mind is when like the iPhone first came out. You might remember this too. And a lot of the initial apps in the App Store were very surface level. So like you could have like the beer app that you're like drinking from the iPhone screen, and a bunch of other like simple like to-do list type of apps that you can still interact with on the phone. But it wasn't until several years later that we started to see these really big businesses like the Ubers and the Snapchats of the world kind of get into the mobile computing space. So I think a very similar transition would probably happen here, where like year one, we're probably going to still explore what this medium means. And by year 5, hopefully there's also a lot more technological innovation on the hardware side. So like, hopefully like AVP, Apple Vision Pro, also evolves into different Vision OS products on that product line. And that offers more ergonomically viable ways for people to experience these types of spatial experiences. So I think in the next 5 years, we'll start to see more designers and more people in general just being excited about spatial computing and like all the applications that these devices provide. And then in 10 years, like who knows, right? I think in 10 years, I think we'll start to see a very mature, relatively saturated ecosystem of apps and games that have already taken advantage of the spatial computing interface and form factor. So I'm personally really excited to get to that like 2034 kind of time span, but it's going to be a long journey, a roller coaster ride to get there, I think.
How do you imagine life in 2034?
Oof.
Like your daily life, how it changed now versus 2034?
Oh wow, I don't think about this that often. I think we will probably have really capable and powerful AR glasses by that point that we can also wear around both indoors and outdoors, and conversationally with AI communicate to the point where we don't have to go through the workarounds of all these apps on our devices, and kind of becomes this like omniscient device that offers information contextually and like immersive experiences when we want to. It's a kind of visual intelligent device that we interact with every day.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like how the iPhone is in our lives now. Like I remember when I first got the iPhone, I think I was like in elementary school, and I remember like playing a bunch of games, and yeah, evolved a lot since then.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, I don't think anyone knows what 2034 is going to look like. To be honest, I think that's like a lot of exciting stuff. Hopefully,
Yeah. Well, Anne thinks AI glasses would be cool. I think so too.
yeah,
Interpretable UI, modern UX design will be dead. At least spatial design.
yes.
Nice, nice, nice. Yeah, kind of hopping over. I guess like kind of taking it back to today. I know I feel like it's gonna be part of everyday life, but today, where do you see what kind of like industries and design opportunities do you see the most relevant for spatial designers in 2024? There's like
Well,
education, games, social
yeah,
media.
yeah. I think games are definitely where spatial designers can shine a lot. I think uh, education is also big because this will also dramatically change how students and the next generation of people learn content, beyond just some of the textbooks that we're familiar with today. Um, I think media will probably be the biggest industry that's influenced by spatial design, just because like even when you look at like AVP usage patterns, a lot of it tends to be associated with like consuming some media form factor. And I think a lot of that is driven, especially over time, by like the ability to create more spatial content. So I saw some of the cool videos that Apple provided on Apple TV, I think, like on the AVP, where you can like experience some people walking down a tightrope and figuring out like how to. I think it was like a sports scene, but like these are experiences that you can only feel on a spatial computing device, and so I think spatial design will have a huge role like in those fields as well.
Mhm. Definitely agree. Like help you
Yeah.
simulate reality so you have more immersed experiences.
Yeah.
And some teacher says social design would change edtech and medtech so much.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I worked on VR games to train surgeons, and I've seen people do like remote surgery with VR.
Hmm.
And so it's interesting in thinking in terms of
Yeah, I think it'll also influence architecture and like interior design, those spaces quite a bit as well. Because I have some like architect friends who say, yeah, like being able to quickly visualize certain spaces before we like fully go into construction and these other fields would be very helpful.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Agree. There's some interesting comments I'm gonna highlight in the chat throughout. So Andy says, modern flat UX design we need to be interoperable. We will slide
Interoperable.
smoothly interoperable. We will slide smoothly between glass and other gadgets. In 10 years' time, the majority of current enterprise software will still be there. Mobile hasn't eliminated people needing to use big screens or spreadsheets, but glasses don't have these limitations.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is some truth to that where, if you think about text, um, on a book, for example, it would be very annoying to read 3D text, right? If like 3D text is flowing and like floating in front of you, and you have to like analyze like what that content is conveying. So I do think certain forms of content, like text, for example, will still belong in a 2D frame, but that doesn't mean the experience itself, like the app itself, will also be locked up in a 2D screen. I think that will flow out into the spatial world.
Mm-hmm. Definitely agree. Farida says housekeeping with management AI. Oh my god, I would love that. I want AI to just, like automate all my chores.
Yes.
Yeah. Kind of topic of spatial design. How does one get started on being a spatial designer? Like any like resources, frameworks to learn, projects to work on.
Yeah, well, Bezi is obviously a spatial design tool that people can get started with. We have a bunch of resources on our YouTube channel or on our website getting started, for you to learn more about what this all really means and what it looks like. I will say, like in general, resources are pretty sparse globally speaking for spatial design as an industry, because when you compare it with like mobile design or like the desktop web design, I think they have very established fundamental principles that drive a lot of the work there. In a way, it can be a little boring because maybe it's too templatized to the point where design kind of becomes just like content filling, which I don't think is like the best way to frame it. But I think with spatial design, there are a lot of exciting rooms for improvement to even define how someone designs for that. So yeah, I think that's like the benefit of like being involved in spatial design at this time.
Yeah, I think we're still very early, so lots of opportunities to shape the future of it as well as we design the future in our conference. Don't want to miss out.
Yeah.
Be part of the future right here in Silicon Valley.
Yes.
Yeah. LinkedIn user says, "Drew Mind is able to be able to sculpt 3D and organic geometric shapes completely in VR using my bare hands or specialized gloves one day." Oh, I would love to do that too. Shape Lab is making some real progress. It'd be interesting to create assets in Shape Lab and they use it in Bezi prototypes. Interesting.
Yeah, that could be really interesting.
Yeah. I know we talk about future and AI. AI is everywhere. So, like, how does AI fit into a spatial designer's workflow?
Yeah, we in case anyone missed it, we did put out Bezi AI recently, and we've already seen a lot of people use it in the product to quickly generate 3D assets that they can then just quickly drag and drop into their 3D editor. It is a very interesting shift or transition that we're making as an industry, because when I think about not only my experience at Oculus per se, but like a lot of the designer friends that I also talk with, for the 3D experience design flow, a lot of the bottleneck tends to happen in the beginning, where you don't really have immediate access to like 3D shapes or objects that you can then use as assets for the experience itself, right? Like I like to say, no chef can cook a delicious meal without good ingredients. And to me, Bezi AI provides this like base level of ingredients that like the designers, like spatial designers in particular, can use and immediately put together or compose together a designed experience, like an app or a game prototype. And that to me, I think is a huge milestone in the industry, where a lot of people were either stuck with two choices, right? Let's say I'm a spatial designer wanting to design some kind of scene or some kind of space around me that I want to prototype. It's either you model it or you like buy it on a 3D marketplace online. But modeling it, as you mentioned, Grace, like can take a lot of time and effort, and a bunch of learning as well. And then buying it, you really don't find that exact type of structure or that object that you want to use. And so something that generative AI is really good at is just like pumping out these like objects really quickly that you can then use in your projects. So that's something that I think we're already seeing AI fit into the spatial design workflow.
To help you be more productive and work faster and help you get rid of designer's block as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Benjamin asks, how do you currently think about 3D sound design when designing spatial interfaces?
Yeah, we also think that sound is a very important element of a spatial experience. Obviously, in the real world, when you walk around, sound is accompanied by visual senses to achieve that end experience. Same thing with like games you play. Sound is a big part of like driving emotion. We haven't really seen that with like apps per se yet, but I think as the lines between apps and games start to blur, sound will definitely be more and more of an important factor in designing a spatial app or a spatial experience. And yeah, that's definitely really important.
Mm-hmm. There's some comments I'm going to highlight in the chat too. Sweta says, I really like the point brought up about the struggles of viewing text in VR. Oh my god, yeah, it's so hard. It's challenging to improve one's reading speed if text is in 3D. I assume we will be able to view 2D text more clearly in VR/MR if either there's easy to use zoom functionality integrated, and B, if the weight of VR/MR devices reduces drastically so there's an ease of being able to move one's head when reading. Just a matter of time for both. Yeah, that's another challenge in VR.
Yeah, I think there are like a couple other novel ways to interact with repeating text, because we now have this entire field of view under control from like an app experience. There might be some better ways without causing nausea, a way for us to like read text differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know motion sickness is also another issue that people face in VR right now. So fixing that too.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Gersty asks, will there any next Bezi/Design Buddies collaborative design event scheduled? I'd love to try Bezi AI and features together along with other users. Yeah, we'll discuss about that. But meanwhile, we're focusing on our conference, which you should totally join in the link down below, in person in SF and online.
Yes. We'll be there too.
Yes.
In person. So
yeah. And virtually if you are not here.
Yeah. But Bezi AI, you can try out today if you just go to bezi.com. We have like an amount of free credits that we give to every new user.
Yeah, definitely check that out, Bezi AI. Question from Jonathan is, how does Bezi compare and contrast to a tool like Spline?
Yeah, I mean, I think Spline is a great tool for sort of 3D assets to embed in like 2D websites, which I believe is their primary use case. I think Bezi is more about designing 3D experiences for 3D devices or 3D like form factors. So what that means is like, like spatial apps, for example, that live on the Quest or Vision OS, or like the 3D games, where it's not about a 2D website per se, but it's like an actual thing that you experience, and like how the entire team workflow revolves around that.
Yeah, definitely agree. I feel like Spline, for me, I see it as like, instead of using like Blender, I would use Spline to like make the 3D assets. Yeah. Kind of tying it back to AI and how spatial design will impact each other. Like, how would spatial design impact the Gen AI and 3D industry the other way around?
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully this is a way for people to consume 3D content more easily, because spatial design really thinks about like how apps can be best optimized for a human-centered experience. And I think oftentimes spatial design hasn't really, well, I guess it's such a new field that like we haven't really seen it being employed properly. But when there are 3D experiences that we want to experience beyond a 2D flat screen, spatial design would allow the average person to experience that thing in a much more digestible and like meaningful way. And I think that's where the importance of spatial design comes in, when a bunch of products and companies start to participate in the 3D industry, and AI being a part of accelerating that process, like what Bezi AI does.
Yeah, I don't think AI will ever replace designers, in my opinion, but I feel like designers will be replaced by designers who use AI, whether that be 2D or spatial designers. So no need to be afraid, friends. And this is a big topic that people are concerned about in Design Buddies. I see some interesting questions. I'm going to try to make sure I'm understanding it. One about the sound curves. So kind of back to the animation. Andy asks, what about the animation timing curves in 3D? Oh, interesting, because it's like you animate stuff in those like XYZ plane. We're
Yeah.
barely seeing 2D UX design integrate this. Will we have curved planes instead of timing Bezier lines?
Yeah, so we actually have these things integrated in Bezi today. So like if you open up the Bezi state machine and then you have an object and then you have a state for it where it like translates or like animates from one position to the other, you can specify different Bezier curves or different ways for this to animate across a particular timing, like timeline. And I think it does definitely move across the XYZ dimensions. So yes, like we could have 2D experiences of 3D animations.
Mm-hmm. Very exciting. Emery asks, how do you view the integration of real-life objects with their virtual counterparts through the Internet of Things? Do you think platforms like Bezi can facilitate these kinds of overlaps, such as controlling IoT devices via their digital twins? Ooh.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of interesting prototypes already where people were controlling like their room lights with like an AR tap or like a button, and like it all is connected from both the physical side and the digital side. Um, I think for sure, Bezi, because it's more of a design and prototyping tool as opposed to like a production app, you can easily set up some states or some interactions where like interacting or pinching on something looks like it's like turning on the lights in your room in real life, but like you could time it so that like it turns on, and like that could be an experience that you could make in Bezi, but in the future could also be connected to like an actual spatial device and like have it all work together as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool. Kind of bringing it back to AI, like with the release of Bezi AI, I would love to learn about you and your team's process of building that. Any like challenges? What was the feedback? Like, what was the process of building it? And after launching it, what was the process of like seeing the feedback and then like kind of iterating upon that?
Yeah. So this was something we've been thinking about for a long time. We knew that as soon as like the initial like Dolly and Midjourney outputs started to appear, do you remember like seeing those square images in the first few generations of the models where it was like slightly awkward looking, but like it still got the job done? Um, Ever since then, we were thinking, oh, this is going to apply to the 3D content world as well. So at some point, I don't know what year or when that's going to be, but at some point, we're going to reach a world where generating a 3D asset is as easy as generating a 2D image. And we kind of optimized Bezi to fit towards that workflow since then on as well. So if you see like the command center as an example, if you just open the app and start typing something, and like we don't have that kind of action or object in the app right now, we like encourage people to use Bezi AI and like start generating stuff and like dragging and dropping that inside the 3D editor as well. So it was a long process of thinking through that user experience and how we can accelerate the workflow for all the spatial designers in the world. It definitely took some trial and error to like figure out what that balance is and like how we would surface this type of model for the user. But yeah, it's like important enough to the workflow that we prioritized it as like as a core item inside that bottom panel, and that the moment you start typing something in the app, that also encourages you to generate an asset as well. Yeah, in terms of feedback, we saw a lot of people just like immediately speed up their workflow, especially people pointing out the feature of like replacing an existing box that they storyboarded in the scene with like an actual model. That was something that we saw being pretty popularly used, because it's like storyboarding, right? Like if you know how like gray boxing works for games or film, It's like rapidly kind of placing different objects in different scenes and different positions to like resemble or represent how that space would feel like. And now you can do that in Bezi with like all these boxes, but immediately like replace these boxes with the actual 3D model, that like a tree, like a palm tree, or like a treasure chest that you can actually just replace these boxes with. So that's, I think, something that is unlocking a whole new type of workflow for this process.
Yeah, creating more simulated to real world experiences, and kind of like being more, having a tool being more accessible to people who might not have the skills or capacity to build 3D objects, but still be able to build experiences that they can envision in their mind with the AI tool. Yeah, I'm curious, kind of like after what's next after Bezi AI, like how do you decide on like what features to add to Bezi?
Yeah, well, it all starts from defining what Bezi is, and because it's a relatively new field, I like to think that it's easier to like drown with features than to like starve with it. It's like it's more important to like narrow down which exact features you want to put into the product itself, right? So because we are a spatial design tool, a 3D design tool, and not a 3D modeling tool, we try to optimize the features that we put inside it on the end-to-end workflow that a spatial designer would want to use. So what that means is we don't lean too hard into like 3D modeling capabilities, for example, right? Like you could use like Blender for that, or you could also, like I said, just generate that in one text prompt with Bezi AI too. So, for us, what we think of it is like from the beginning, which is like the spark of imagination and like the scene that I want to prototype, and going there all the way up to production, right? So the Bezi doesn't export actual compiled packages that you would then install on a device as an app or a game, but we, similar to what Figma might do, we can go pretty far in terms of how the team works on that project. So that's what we focus on, is how do we go from like, is this feature basically serving a purpose for the ideation or the iteration or the design, the composition, or the prototyping phases. And after prototyping, it's obviously the visualization and handoff to developers who would actually implement that project. So this whole workflow is what we orient all our features on.
I feel like Herlos of Figma, how they have like dev mode now and stuff. I love it. No, I love it. It's like Figma 3D and Bezi's your 3D. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are definitely parallels because, like it's just the nature of the 3D industry in general, at least from what I've seen so far, is a lot of designers in this industry have been forced to be technical. So, let's say you're a game designer, chances are you already know how to use a game engine like Unity or Unreal because you were forced to that option because that was the only option available. Like, how else would you express your complex ideas around like interactive 3D scenes or 3D experiences? Well, now with a tool like Bezi, that type of game designer can also express that idea through Bezi just in a matter of a couple minutes on a web app, as opposed to downloading and installing a game engine and learning how to code in C# and like scripting that interactive 3D experience out. So I think the term and the way we think about the design workflow for the 3D industry is also evolving. And it's our responsibility to also make sure that the tool reflects that workflow in terms of features.
I guess currently on like the workflow itself, like what are some misconceptions people have about spatial designers? I know one is like you need to be technical, you need to know how to code.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing I wanted to touch on. Is I think from the outside especially, this field seems like a very advanced technical field where a lot of 3D effects have historically been technical. Like when you think about visual effects or like CGI for films, it takes very advanced 3D tools to create those types of effects. When you think about a lot of the popular games that people play, it takes a lot of technical work to design or prototype even that kind of scene. But I think we're now entering an age where more and more people can now create a spatial design experience pretty easily, relatively easily with Bezi, and immediately visualize that on a spatial device. So that's something that people might have misconceptions about, and think that, oh, it's like a pretty difficult, pretty niche, pretty technical thing to become. But I'm here to say that it's a lot more accessible thing that anyone can get into, as long as they know how to use a laptop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I know, no need to be scared, friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're gonna ask, are there specific industries that are adapting spatial design faster currently today? I know in the future probably everyone, but like currently today, which ones is faster?
I was looking at some of Apple's publications around their initial apps on the App Store. So that's actually one thing that you could look at to see like which types of apps or experiences are really taking off faster than others. I'm seeing a lot of like entertainment-based experiences, like games. I'm also seeing a lot of like visualization experiences. So whether that's for sports or for particular so like for sports, I've seen like race cars, like where like there's a 3D visualization of the racetrack in front of you and like a bunch of modularized UI panels that would represent certain types of information for the user. I've seen those apps. I've seen like recently a rocket app, like a rocket ship app, where you can like visualize the 3D models of the rockets that are like launching recently, and like seeing them travel in space, which is all 3D and spatial. So I think that's really cool. So yeah, I mean, primarily on the entertainment side, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
Yeah.
see a lot of. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to mention, I recently also saw like Bloomberg have like an AVP app for having those like screens on like financial like stocks exchanges and stuff. So that was also another interesting use case, because like they're the ones who are like notorious for having so many screens around you and like tracking all the financial data, right? So
Yeah, we all like a day trader and stuff. I think it'll be good use cases.
right, because you can have infinite screens around you and just like track everything.
Yeah, I love that. Cognitive overload to the max, but I feel love it.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. No, I think I love it because I feel like these days I'm like pretty nomadic, and having a laptop, I love having a big screen on my screens, but I would just like love to carry all the screens with me and my Vision Pro at my fingertips. So yeah, another like enterprise use case for spatial design.
Yeah, productivity, I think, is a whole new area that will be pulled forward with spatial computing, because it's like it's like, why do you need to have a big monitor screen in front of you on your desk? If you have a device that can project that type of content in front of you anyway, right? So like for like the lifestyle that you described, that's perfect, because you don't need to carry around like a monitor screen everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another, I guess, like enterprise productivity use case, this could be debated as well, but like I know Facebook is building like Quest for like virtual meetings. But now like they're having everyone back into the office, but one potential use case is like remote workers having built in that like presence in-person meeting experiences in VR. But I don't know how that's going right now, but that's just the idea I had. Is like being present, but I don't think anyone can replace like actual face-to-face human interaction, but it could make you feel a degree closer to each other.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the next best thing after being physically next to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are many times when you can't be physically right next to each other for various reasons, whether it's like friends or family or coworkers. And presence, like, is something that I think is also evolving in definition through a device like AVP, right? I think Apple also recently released like the personas feature where you can kind of feel like you're next to people as you're experiencing an app in front of you. And I mean that's really cool because that's like redefining what collaboration really is like.
Another interesting idea or thing I've seen is one of our housemates at Bunny House, everyone's a founder here, one of them is working on a VR dating app. So like you meet on an app and then you have like dates in VR and then you can get a vibe check. You date with someone's avatar. So you can get like a sense of like how people are before you decide to meet with them in real life.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the, like I said, it's the closest thing to meeting them in person. So if you don't want to be in awkward physical situations, then this is the closest thing.
Yeah, just a random aside. Other use cases I've seen. There's a lot of, I'm going to read off some of the interesting comments. So Andy says, one of the ways I think AI can help 3D design is providing you with good viewpoints and lighting automatically. Users should be able to have a guided experience where they don't find themselves staring into space with the model far in a distant galaxy behind them or stuck with their head on the wall. Yeah, another AI use case. It's more like holistic.
Yeah, 100%.
So Josie asks, for those who are interested in programming, when it comes to programming spatial designs and like building them out with code, any tools or languages you would recommend?
Yeah. So if you're building an app for the Apple Vision OS ecosystem, as an example, you have sort of the Swift reality kit approach where you can just program on Xcode like a native app that would run on the device. And if you want a more immersive experience, you can technically also use like C# as a programming language on Unity to export a package that would run as an app on AVP as well. So I believe that those are the two ways that currently are more popular. There might be some other ways to use different game engines and like export those into different platforms as well. But that's what I see so far.
Yeah. Kind of going back into some submitted questions. Where do you see Bezi evolve in the next 1, 5, and 10 years? Aligning on the spatial design's workflow, but any specific things you can share or can't share yet?
Yeah. Well, we have ambitious plans over the next 1, 5, 10 years. I think for the long-term sort of 5, 10-year perspective, the digital world is a lot more complex and nuanced than we think. And there's a lot of content. And as all this content becomes more and more spatial or three-dimensional, people and companies need a creation tool to capture that imagination and turn it into reality. And we will continue to work on making sure that Bezi is the fastest way to get there. The fastest way to collaborate with your team and make sure that any type of content in 3D can be experienced. And that's a broad scope, right? Like if you think about any type of content in 3D, then that's a pretty big field. So.
Yeah, honestly, that's how I think of like Design Buddies as well. It's like pretty broad. Just want to like have fun, give value, and help designers grow. I'm curious. Like, I'm just gonna scroll through to make sure I didn't miss any questions. But I'm curious. Like, in your overall journey building Bezi, like, what are some like challenges and highlights that you faced along the way so far?
Yeah. I think self-constraints, like imposing constraints into the product that you're building intentionally has been a little difficult, because I think when I first got started, I thought, whatever in 3D could be built in Bezi, kind of like what I just said for the 5-10 year plan. But that's not sharp enough of a wedge to get started when you're building a product, right? So you really need to kind of hone in or sort of narrow down to like a particular use case and also expand from there over time. And that's something that I've experienced myself, where we had to say, we had to kind of draw a line and say, hey, these are features and these are use cases and functionalities that we're just not going to support through Bezi today. And these are things that we will support and that we will commit to and prioritize. So that exercise of like almost artificially constraining yourself to like focus on a smaller number of things, I think has been the most challenging part. But I think we're now at a place where we feel pretty good about the persona, like the types of people that we're working for in that sense, and that we want to serve as creators. And yeah, that's how we see it.
Relatable. I want to focus on everything as well.
Yeah, right. If you focus on everything, then you don't have any focus.
Yeah, exactly. So I need to work on that. Yeah. One thing I'm working towards always is to have more focus as well, but also have fun along the way. Yeah, like in general, like what are you looking forward to these days?
Yeah, a lot of things. Maybe I'll skip some of the obvious stuff around like upcoming Bezi launches and stuff like that. I am excited for the SF Marathon that's happening this summer. I am not prepared for it, but I will try my best to be in shape as much as possible by then. That's something I'm looking forward to.
What made you want to run the marathon?
Just because I want more pain in my life. I'm kidding. I think that there's something about, I mean, you run too, right?
Yeah, so
that there's something beautiful about being in constant repetitive motion. I think when you're running outside and then, just feeling like you're consistently working towards something that I think actually has high parallels to building a startup, because it's such a long time frame, right? It's like you don't have a product like this overnight. So it's a figurative marathon, and so I wanted to run a literal marathon as well.
I love that comparison. Yeah, I've been running since I was like, I guess like I've been running for over 10 years actually. I was like big competitive runner before. I feel like I highly recommend running, or like any form of cardio, to everyone building stuff, or like in general, because it really builds your mental endurance, and it's like pretty meditative as well. Just think about life and just unplug from notifications for a while and think about life, reflect, connect the dots of all these floating things in your head.
Yeah, 100%. It's a good way to keep your body active, but also think about some other stuff while you're at it.
Yeah. As we wrap up, what are some advice you would share with your younger self?
Oof. Advice. My younger self. I'm trying to. I don't want to be cliche. I'm also trying to say something that might make sense for like other people who are in similar shoes of like starting companies. I think having a bigger vision and a bigger mission than your day-to-day work, of course, but even the company itself could really help, because I think when I was younger, I didn't place enough importance in values and principles, and I think nowadays I see more of the value in where this is all headed and like why I'm even doing all this stuff. So figuring out like the why behind the why as early as possible. Of course, it'll evolve, but like before you go too deep into something very specific, I think figuring out like why you're working on this is so important that I just can't overemphasize that.
I love that. Keep questioning
Yeah.
things. Like,
Yeah.
question why. Like, if you're a student, ask why you're learning something.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I think the world is a lot more beautiful than it seems sometimes. And I think I missed out on some of that stuff when I was younger. Yeah. Kind of focusing on near-term goals too much sometimes. It's a balance, right? Because you do want to focus on near-term milestones to get to that eventual long-term goal. But I mean, life is short, right? Like life is like, I like to think that life is a gift, but with an unknown expiration date. And it's up to you to decide how to use this gift.
I love that. Life is a gift with an unknown expiration, and it's the powers to you. I love that. So balancing having a long-term vision, but also enjoying every day, enjoying the journey.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Now go slay your goals, everyone. You got this. Awesome. Thank you so much. That was amazing. Loved how we touched on spatial design, Bezi, AI, and more tips for our designers. Make sure to check out our conference, Design the Future. Bezi is our title sponsor, so you'll see myself and Julian and the Bezi team and the learners team and all of our other wonderful sponsors at our conference on May 20th, Monday, in person in San Francisco and online for free. We have a couple of thousand people who signed up, so it's going to be a huge one. You don't want to miss out. And yeah, we'll be talking more about spatial design, AI. We got to talk on blockchain. Got very exciting list of speakers to be confirmed very soon. So yeah, make sure to sign up in the link down below and check out Bezi AI and let us know what you think about it. Julian, anything else to share before we wrap up?
No, I think that was a pretty cool conversation. Yeah, thank you all for joining today. And I wish you all the best from a spatial design perspective and from a life perspective.
Yeah, I hope y'all slay your goals, make awesome spatial experiences, and have lots of fun and live your best life. All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.